Hi, folks. We're down here in beautiful Berkeley, California. We're making a family movie. I don't know what order it's going to be. It's probably really messed up, made by Spike and Mike, and I hope it comes out.
Okay.
This is the house where Mom was born, 1920 Grant Street, Berkeley, California. I don't know how long she lived here, but this is where it all started, on the roadside.
Yeah, I think so. Want me to get a little close-up of the house?
Yeah,
or?
get a look.
Okay. How you doing?
Yeah, so do you have any spare change? I'm trying to get something to eat.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Got there, Dad? See if I can. And here's a little side view of the house.
Now we're going to move on to another address on Grant Street, 1632. That's where I met Mom. That was our courting case.
Okay.
Well, we're down the other end of Grant Street now, 1632. This is where all the courting days.
This is 1632 Grant Street, as Dad just said. This is where he met Mom back when they were at Berkeley High School. This is where she lived. And through that door is the couch they used to smooch on. And up in here, these are the windows that Mom used to wave her towel out at Aunt Bernice. That was her bedroom. And there's the courting room right through those windows there. Dad did a lot of courting, of course. As you know, 6 kids. And Mom lived here for how many years, Dad?
I guess about 8 or 9 years. She went to all through high school here, but not junior high.
All right, so she lived her high school years here. And like I said, this is where they met. And we're just going to give you a little view here of the street here. Down here, way down in the corner is where Uncle Frank and Aunt Mel first had their houses when they set up their housekeeping.
And Bert were neighbors, friends. I've always told everybody she would have had 6 nurseries and 6 kids. She'd marry Bert.
That's Bert Bertolaro's house, the green roof house. And this is the neighborhood around here. There's Dad again. And this is kind of the typical Berkeley neighborhood that Mom grew up in. Okay, and Dad, you want to tell us where we're going next?
Well, I guess we'll go down and see where old Pop Murphy hung out in his Berkeley days.
Okay.
Well, this is my first place when I moved to Berkeley. I was 6 years old. Mom bought this place brand new, $4,500. So Uncle Frenny and myself, Peg, Catherine, Uncle Willie. I guess it was about 1928. And I stayed here till I went into the service. And then when I came back, I stayed here till Mom and I were married. That was my bedroom right in front, upstairs there.
And here's a picture of the block. Dad says it hasn't changed too much since he's here. There's a couple of vacant lots that have houses in them now, and a couple of houses torn down.
For playing football.
Mm-hmm.
This was a one-time tap. That telephone pole. The other telephone.
Mm-hmm. Right here's the house. And you're just one block off a main thoroughfare. It seems like a really quiet little neighborhood here. Okay. Now, next we're going to be heading over to see where Mom and Dad had their engagement party, and then we're on to El Cerrito to see where Dad kind of had his formed years in the early age of 1 through 6. And we're recording now. This is the house that Dad's engagement party was at.
This
Mom?
was Betty Spillman. She worked with Mom at Pacific Steel Casting. They were good friends, and she held an engagement party here, of course. The night I gave Mom her engagement ring, the next day I shipped out overseas for 2 years. Hope she'd be here when I come back, and she was.
So this was in 1942 then?
Right.
Stand by. We're recording now.
This is St. Joseph's, the Workman Church in Berkeley, California. It's at Jefferson and Addison. I think it was built about 1906, but this is where both Mom and myself were Mom was baptized here. I was not. But we made our first communions here, confirmation, and we married here. Jimmy was baptized here. The only one of my boys was baptized here.
And that was a jogger. It's not part of the tape.
Down here, if you want to just take a real squint, we take a walk down if you want, Dan.
Okay.
This is St. Joseph Elementary School. That's where I went from the 1st to the 8th grade.
All right, let's walk on down there.
Still the same old building.
Okay, now this is the church here again, and this is Dad's old elementary school, St. Joseph's. So we're just going to go over and take a look at St. Joseph's now. Here's Dad's elementary school. Was it look exactly the same, Dad, as when?
No, in fact, it was an old wooden building, and looks like they've upgraded a little bit. And that one down at the end down there, that's been added on. But basically, I've been inside since then. I was in there a couple of years ago, and inside it looks about the same as ever.
Now, how many kids went here when you were
The
here?
nuns aren't there knocking you across the knuckles anymore.
And how many kids went here when you were here?
Oh, hell, when I graduated from the 8th grade, there was only 16 in the graduating class.
Okay, so approximately about 100 students then, huh?
About all.
This is the front of the church that Dad and Mom were married in.
I was also a soprano choir boy at the church.
You zoom in on Dad. He's going into the church. I don't know how good the lighting will be in here, if you can actually see the church or what. I don't have the greatest camera in the world here, but this is the church around.
Oh, here's the confessions. They're the same as ever. I spent a lot of time in those places. Getting help.
There's windows, the confessions. Dad.
The old pipe organs in those days.
Okay. Right there, it's just this camera's not the greatest. That's where the choir was, where Dad sang to the pipe organ. You know, I guess the lighting.
Well, I'm sorry I can't show you the first apartment that Mom and I had, because we had to share that with a Navy couple, and that's been torn down to make way for the Grove Shafter Freeway. This was the first real apartment we had. I was still in the service, come back from overseas, and we lived here about 2 years, I guess, in 2091 California. So that was our apartment up the top, 3rd floor, the one on the right. Of course, I could walk up 3 flights in other days.
And was Jimmy born here?
Jimmy was conceived here, but he wasn't born here.
Oh, okay.
Well, this is where Dad got started about 73 3/4 years ago. Unfortunately, the old homestead is done gone. I could buy one day and they had a wrecking ball knocking it down. Made me real sad. They built a furniture store on it. Of course, this neighborhood, freeway, Dallas behind us, there was no freeway. Every building across the street is totally gone. Everything was ripped out. There's nothing at all like the neighborhood I was born. And Danny would turn directly around. You could see the El Cerrito Hills, the Myra Vista area. There was nothing at all, nothing but just vacant hill, vacant hillside. Long time ago.
Yeah, it's all houses.
It's not a change for the better, believe me.
And of course, there's still one house left in the neighborhood. Don't know who lives there. Let's see, you can see the freeway's right there. That wasn't there when Dad was here. Get it on focus here.
Rock quarry in El Cerrito. We used to blast. Well, when my dad died in 1927, we were living in the place in San Pablo we just showed you. I really don't know why, and there's no one else to ask now. But we moved here in 1927 with my grandfather in this little house at 1311 Elm Street. And why we moved here, well, from then we went to Berkeley. I guess we just stayed here about a year, but it was a happy year, as I remember. My grandfather was the greatest old guy, and he's where the Jimbo Jambo came from.
And here's the street.
There was only 2 houses on this block then. This little one of my grandfather, he owned the property all the way to the corner and had a big garden. He had chickens and rabbits. And there was one house down the other end of the block, the Albonico boys, Henry and Eddie, who now own or are just in the process of retiring from Albert's Nursery in El Cerrito. Those were the only 2 houses on the block. In fact, El Cerrito was, I think at that time, a population of about 2,000 people.
And this is at 1311 Elm Street. Right? Okay.
Well, from here, from Elm Street up to the hill, you can see where all that hillside is. That was a rock quarry in those days. They had a railway down the next block, ran up from the train spur, and they'd blast every once in a while, but shake the whole town. Then it closed down, I guess during the war it closed down, but there wasn't a house outside of the Bota's house right here in front of you. There wasn't a house from here to the hills. Not a house, all open fields. And we used to go up there and take a sheet of tin or something, slide down all those big piles of rock and gravel, like going to Heavenly Valley for us.
Now. 1, 2, 3.
Well, we're here in San Pablo Cemetery, St. Joseph's Cemetery in San Pablo. My dad was the first on the Murphy side. I guess my poor dad was the first guy in the family laid to rest here. He passed away in 1927. And this is the grave of James P. Murphy, and my mother, or your grandmother, Catherine Murphy. Then behind them, when my dad came over from Ireland, there was 4 brothers came over. James, John, Edward, and Martin. Martin is buried right behind my dad. He died in 1939. He was 38 years old. This is Martin's grave here. 38 years old he passed away. And the 3 brothers came over. They went to, the 4 brothers that came over, 3 of them went to work in the mines, copper mines in Arizona. And I guess that's what caused their early deaths. They all died from tuberculosis, except Edward. Because Edward, I don't believe, worked in the mines. Edward then returned to Ireland, and then none of the boys, my dad was the only one married here. But Ed went back to Ireland and married a girl, and he had 4 children, and that's Kathleen Murphy's grandpa. There was also, the 4 Murphy boys came over, but there was 3 Murphy boys stayed behind and 1 girl. And I met some of their children when I was in Ireland. They would be my first cousins. But this is John's Murphy's grave, my Uncle John, his brother. He died in 1932. He's the guy, I think you guys have seen pictures of him, the guy with the eye shade in the candy store in Vallejo that nobody ever bought the candy. We had that little room in the back. I guess he was selling something besides candy, I don't know. But he was a very great guy too. All my uncles were great.
Good.
That's all the Murphys in this part of the cemetery. Now this is my right next to them is on my mother's side, the Keene side, is my grandpa John Keene. He lived to be in his 70s. And I lived with him for 1 year, as you saw earlier. A great guy. We used to call him Greenie. Just a fun guy. Okay, Greenie. And this part of the cemetery, of course, as Dan will flash around, this is the old part of the cemetery where they have all the old stones, all the old angels. Like they say, they don't make them like that anymore. Good for them. My dad's practically trying to remember this place because the cemetery ended right down about where those cars are at that time when I was.
2, 3.
Continuing on with the Murphy side, we're over here in another section of the cemetery now. This is my brother, Frenny, or Francis Frank. He's always Frenny everybody else. We all miss Frenny. I guess a lot of you guys didn't get to know him. Ben did.
Well, I got to know Uncle Frenny. Not very long, as you can see, died in 1957. I was only 4 when he passed away, but he was killed in an accident. He was hit as he was crossing the street, and he died. And mostly I remember about Uncle Frenny was that he was the Tootsie Roll king. He bought us Tootsie Rolls like you couldn't believe. And he was a nice guy, and he always made my dad laugh whenever he came over. And I know that as kids we respected him so much that when we would go up to our great aunt and uncle's house in Volcano, nobody ever slept in Uncle Frenny's room. It was like a shrine. Nobody ever slept there. Good old Uncle Frenny. Anyway, one thing about Uncle Frenny that I remember from my dad telling me is that Dad had a car that he was just in love with, an old Model T. And when he left for the war, Frenny was still too young to go in. He told him, "Watch out for my car, Frenny." Well, Dad wasn't even out of the city limits. Uncle Frenny had smashed up the car. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
This is not exactly the Murphy side, but it's really the end of the Murphy part of the family. Although I'm sure in the epilogue you left out a lot of things, but this is the grave of William Corcoran and Catherine Corcoran. Now, you heard, and your sister Peg, but they were raised, Peg and Catherine were raised with me and us like brothers and sisters. So that's why I run into it then. Let's go crop and loop. Now we're into the Rose side, or as the old Portuguese used to say, Portuguese was Rosa. But anyhow, this was Grandpa Rose and Grandma Rose, and they both lived. I think Grandpa, he was 70s, and Grandma went to 80s. And of course, Grandma was everybody's grandma. Everybody loved her. Nice people.
What did they think about you when they first met you, Dad?
Well, they didn't have too much choice, I guess. Well, Rita made a shitty selection, but they're stuck with me. So we always got along great. It was great. So they knew they weren't going to get a dowry, but they were getting a son-in-law with a busted-down car and $60 in the bank. Well, one thing, I gave her a lot of grandsons. We're still in the Rhodes family. This is over another section again. And this is Uncle Walt Rhodes, Mom's sister, Mom's brother, sorry about that. Walt was young when he died too, accident. Used to call him Satchmo. He looked and acted a lot like Grandma, like Rita. Another nice guy. And I have nice relatives, right? Mom had another sister who died at 16 with rheumatic fever, but unfortunately she's not buried here. She's out at the old St. Mary's Cemetery in Oakland, Barbara Road. I never met Barbara. She used to peek at me when I was dating Rita. She'd peek around from the bedroom and take a check out of this guy.
Now, how did Walter get the name Satchmo?
Well, I don't know. I guess I gave it to him. But let's call him Little Satch.
Is that after Louis Armstrong, or?
No, I don't know what the hell it was about. Just that was it.
Okay. Just.
Yeah, Mike. We're back to the Murphy side, and this is sort of a sad thing in a way because I had a brother, John Francis Murphy, and a sister Helen, who Francis died in the influenza epidemic in 1919. I think he was about 6 months old, and my sister Helen was stillborn. But I never did know where they were buried. I knew they were buried in this area, but that's all I knew. I guess there was a stone. And we went to the office today, they marked it out, finally found the spot. There's no stone, but this is where it'd be you, my boys, Uncle John, and their Aunt Helen. So we finally found their resting place. Well, we're back with the Rose family again, and this is Mom's sister, Mel. Of course, she was the oldest of all the Rose kids, and Auntie Mel, she's been gone since what, 88. And that was a lot of fun too. So, got Frank's spot, empty spot, waiting for him. Got my spot down the road.
Good.
Save the best for last.
Well, as you can see by Dad's reaction, this is Mom's grave. We miss old Mom.
See my future spot here, guys.
Yeah. This is where Dad will go eventually. And Mom was
Don't rush these.
the number 4 of the Rose kids. And she was preceded in death by her 2 youngest and her oldest sister. She still has 2 brothers, Uncle Junior, or Uncle George, and Uncle Bill. They're still around. And that's it. Okay. Okay, we're signing off now. Okay. All right, Dad. This is the last part of our... Okay, Dad. Let's do this again. We saw some of the houses that you lived in, and we saw a lot of the things and stuff we did. Just tell us, we saw your apartment, and after you left that apartment, what happened? Where'd you go from there?
Well, after the apartment, we like I said, it was a small 2-room apartment. It had the old, what they call a Murphy bed, wall bed, and it would have been a tough place to raise a baby, but homes were still tough to get then because there'd been no building during the war. We had some friends that had a triplex in Oakland, so they said one is going to become empty, so we took that, and it was on 62nd Street in Oakland. We stayed there a little over a year. Jimmy was born there. Well, off the base, but I mean that was his first home. Then we moved to El Cerrito because my Aunt Mary Bruno, the little house next to her was becoming vacant. It was a house. It was small, but it was, it was a house. And so we got that, and it was going to be, I think the rent was $65 a month because I was fixing some of the things for the lady. She's an old Italian lady, very nice lady. I did a lot of paint and fix it up for her, so she reduced the rent to $60. So it was great. We enjoyed it. It had a nice little garden there, and it was just a nice place. Then we decided with the GI loan that we should buy a house, and I wanted to go out to Walnut Creek area or there because things were cheaper and time, and you can get more for your dollar. But Mom wouldn't think of going out over the hill. She wanted to. I was lucky to get her out of Berkeley. Then we moved to the old homestead on Norville, which $10,000 house for $1,500. I think I got free among the half of that. And as you know, that became the old homestead for many moons.
Yeah. How much was your original house payment? Do you remember how much your original house payment was?
$48.
That include taxes?
It's everything. Taxes.
Now, we talked about you grew up in Berkeley mostly. You moved there when you were 6 or 7 years old. And how much, other than your brothers and sisters, well, your 2 adopted sisters and your brother, how many other relatives did you have in the city of Berkeley?
Well, I had my Uncle Tom and Aunt Sarah, Tom Keene being my mom's brother. They had three kids, Maureen, Jack, and Eileen. And they lived about, not too many blocks from us, but, families socialized more in those days. And they were always at our house, and we were always at theirs. My Aunt Nell had an apartment in Berkeley until she got married later. She's a little later to get married, but she got married to her, and they bought a house in Albany. Their sister Mary lived in El Cerrito, and she'd come down and help my mom out. But we were very close to the Keens, and I was very close to Jack, because we went all the way through school together. He was a year ahead of me. And I guess we were so close in age, we were a year and a half apart, so he didn't have a brother, and I didn't have anybody, so we were more like brothers, really. And wherever he went, I went, and vice versa. They wanted a trip or a vacation, I just assumed I was supposed to go along. So I did. Free mother.
Now, when you and Jack were hanging out, did Freddie always want to tag along?
Yeah, but we always, sometimes, well, you take a hike, kids, you know how it is with your grandkids, with older sisters and brothers. I remember one time he was tagging along, and I guess we wanted to try smoking. Somebody's got some cigars, and we were all smoking cigars, and we let Freddie smoke one. He got sick, and I had to take him home and tell my mom he fell down or something. I'm not sure she believed me.
Now, earlier I found out while we were just talking that Grandma wasn't from Ireland. I always thought she was. Your mother.
No, my mother, she was born in Illinois, and they were raised in Omaha. But her folks were from Ireland, from Tipperary. I never knew my Grandma Kane, because apparently she died when the kids were quite young. But like I said, when the others speak in cemetery, that Grandpa Kane was just a fun, real easy, big guy. Fun guy. I lived with him for a short time, but always saw, got to see him a lot. But he just was a nice guy. He's the one like I told you that started that Jimbo stuff, and just a nice guy.
Now, do you know what brought them to California from Omaha?
I don't. I think my dad, Jim Murphy Sr., was the first of the group to come out. He went to Arizona, because I still got letters in there from my to exchange for my mom and dad when he was in Arizona. He was in Tombstone, Arizona, working in the copper mines. And then I think he decided to get out of that, because I guess he didn't last long there. And he came to California and opened up insurance. He was an insurance broker in Richmond. And then I think the rest of the family kind of followed him out. And my mother, but I'm sorry. He went back to Omaha. My mother and dad were married in Omaha. And then they came out here, bought a house, and he started that business in Richmond. And the rest of them followed out here.
So that wedding picture that we have of them is in Omaha?
Yeah, it's taken Omaha, yeah.
Taken Omaha. All right, well, how about a little bit of your activity when you were growing up? You came to Berkeley when you were 8, you went to St. Joseph's, and you did St. Mary's for 1 year, and then you went to Berkeley High. What were some of your activities that you did?
Well, of course, the activities of when I was at St. Joseph's, of course, you were a traffic boy, a choir boy, and you better be a model student. You had all the nuns in those days. The old knuckle-cracking nuns. Then I had 1 year, I enjoyed St. Joseph's. I still see friends that graduated. We graduated 16 guys in the class. I still see, just had lunch with one of my old eighth grade was a graduation in the broken school. Just had lunch with old Bert Acton. We graduated from, we went through the first grade together. Just had lunch about 2 months ago. There's still a few of us around. Then I was St. Mary's High. I went there 1 year, and I was going to go out for the football team, but I broke my arm during the summer. Fell off a car. And so my arm was still in a splint during the last year. And I went to Berkeley High. Jack and I played on what they call the 130-pound team, because neither one of us were big enough for varsity. But we had a good time. We belonged to, those days it was the days of the clubs. I know they call it fraternity. I went fraternities. I guess I don't know what the hell they were, but ours was the Corinthians. And we had a fun time. We had picnics and dances and our meetings, and just a fun thing. And that's where I met your mom. I remember one day I thought, well, we didn't know each other, but we'd pass each other. Their locker was near mine. We'd pass each other. Pretty soon, I guess, it was a nod here, nod there. So one day I thought, man, I was going to put this book in my locker that'll break the ice. Well, that was a mistake.
6 kids later, huh?
Yeah. If I'd have known now, I'd have moved my locker.
And so you met Mom there. Now you dated Mom in high school. And when you graduated from high school, did you go to college at all, or?
No, I didn't, because you know, in those days, especially if your family wasn't college oriented, you just assumed. Besides that, my mother was she had no, she was running out of money by that time. I used to figure I just had to go to work. So I went to work, and I got a job at Standard Oil. Well, not right away, but after a while, I had my first halfway decent job where I made any money. But of course, it wasn't there very long when the war came along. So that was the end of my short working time till Uncle Sam put me to work.
And so then, right before you already testified, told us, about how you got engaged with Mom. The next day you shipped out, and I assume you corresponded during the war.
Oh yeah, it was hard because, you know, especially overseas, especially down the war zones, you didn't get letters. Maybe you could write them, but they didn't get off. They shipped you once somewhere, and I might not get a letter for a month, and all of a sudden I'd get 10 letters. Nobody could correspond all the time, and I was down there for over 2 years, South Pacific, and then when I came home, the war was winding down. They told me I wouldn't have to go back overseas anymore because I'd spent enough time there, and we had a lot of combat time, so I said I could have duty in the States. So then we decided to I was still in the service. We decided I could get married because I was going to be stationed here. So we got married, and then I was stationed over at the Alameda Naval Air Station where when the war was over. That's where I was discharged from.
So you were discharged right after the war was over. After VJ Day, you were...
Pretty close, because they had what they call a point system. They would go by your time in the service, and time overseas counted more than we. So a lot of guys who spent the whole career here in the States, some of them didn't get out even though they had more time than a guy who, like I said, I had over 2 years overseas time, so that counted more than some guy that had maybe 4 years in the States. Although I had duty here too, but I mean...
Okay. So that's when you set out for your housekeeping with Mom then?
Right.
Now, your first apartment that you had that you talked about that you shared with that, were you in the service when you...
Yeah, and boy, places were really tough to get in. And this was a dump. But we called it the El Patio. And it had a Murphy bed also, but gee, that was it. We had that room. The kitchen was more like a ex-broom closet like this. And the bathroom we had to share with the couple next door, but luckily they were a couple in the Navy too. So lucky I could do all my shaving and showering over at the air station. So Mom went to her mom's all the time, but the bathroom didn't give much use, thank goodness. But they were a real nice couple, there was no problem.
Well, we touched on this a little bit at the cemetery, but some of the stories you had about Grandpa Rose, he seemed like he was quite a character. And I know that a lot of people have probably heard it, but I'd like to hear it one more time. Story about you guys remodeling the kitchen together.
Well, Grandpa Rose was a gruff person. I think he had a heart of gold underneath, but he could be pretty rough with you. And he was a carpenter, contractor, and he said he remodeled the kitchen. Well, I remember one time I went down to get, of course, he'd leave messages for me when I came to work. He had 3 weeks work I was supposed to do when I came home from work for the next day. But then he also, on Saturday, he said, we have to go down and get some more wood at El Cerrito Lumber. So we went down there. We didn't have any trucks, so he told the guy, I want to use your truck too. So the guy looked at him and said, give us the truck, and he said, never mind, we'll go over and load it ourselves. So he go over there, and of course, we'd already paid for the wood, but that wasn't going to stop Grandpa, because he said, well, throw a few more, because I've given these guys a lot of money. They owe me something. He says, throw some more on there, Jim. So that was Grandpa Rose's way.
And what was the thing about, what happened with the inspector or something that he did?
Oh, and when he put the new flooring down, he had to leave space open because for the new connections to the old connections, the plumbing, for the inspector, see, the building inspector. He's supposed to come by that next day, and he never showed up. So Grandpa says, well, the hell with him. I'm not waiting for him. Nailed it all over, and the guy come by the following day. And knowing Grandpa, he wasn't going to, he talked that guy out of looking down there. He wasn't tearing us meeting.
Well, and then what about Grandma? I mean, did you have a good relationship with Grandma? Or?
Oh, Grandma Rose is a wonderful person, wonderful person. The poor thing had a tough life because raising 6 kids, she lost a daughter at 16 from rheumatic fever, which today I guess doesn't even exist, I don't know. And then Walter was killed in that accident, he was 30. And Grandpa Rose, although he just was not a good provider. I mean, if he made 100, he kept his share in his own pocket, and poor Grandma had to scratch around for what she could do, you know. She had a tough life. I mean, she probably was better off in her later years, she wasn't alive. But a wonderful woman. A lot like her daughter. Rita was a lot like her mother.
Okay, well, I really can't think of any other questions right now at this time. It might be a few more.
I hope that we answered a lot of things. I know you can see now that most of my friends are horizontal out at St. Joseph's rather than vertical somewhere else. But I still have some vertical friends, too, that are alive and well.
One thing, though, is that your father, our grandfather, was from Ireland.
Yes, that was Cutting Mill.
And I remember somewhere near the town of Ballina, is that right?
Ballina was the closest large town. Where he lived out was, well, I've seen a lot of boonies, but this was really out in the boonies where he was from. They were mostly fishermen. And halfway. Not farmers for a living, but farmers for their own rules.
And now, is that where, when you went back to Ireland, is that where the relatives you visited, are they still in that area?
Oh yes, they took me to show the birthplace of my father and his brothers. I saw the house where my uncle Ed, when he went back to Ireland, built for his new bride. I got to meet first cousins who lived right in that same area, and then I met some other cousins who moved a little bit away. I have another first cousin, JP's, Kathleen's father's sister, who lives down in Cork, near Waterford. And that's a lovely area down there, a really nice place. But the rest are mostly up in the Mayo area.
Okay, well, thanks for
Thanks for taping us by. It comes out.
Doing this, and I hope those that see it get some enjoyment out of it. I know it's an amateur tape, and
well, I don't know. There's a couple of professionals here.
You know, we're back by popular demand here. Everybody's viewed the tape a little bit, and they want to just see if we can add a couple of things to it. So we're going to get down to that. Some of the things that we want to touch on is everybody's favorite uncle, Uncle Frenny. And we all know that in the tape that Uncle Frenny was killed at a very young age. He was 31 years old in a car accident. He was actually a pedestrian. You know, we just wanted to ask a few questions about Frenny because we all know he was a great guy and everything else, but we didn't know, like what was he like growing up, and what did he do for a living before he was killed, and just tell us a little bit about Frenny.
Well, of course, Frenny was about 4 or 5 years younger than myself, and of course, because he was always the tag-along brother when we were little, and me and Jack, my cousin, was a little closer in age and lived near us. I did more with Jack than really Frenny, because Frenny, like I said, was younger. But like I said before, he tagged along a lot. He also went to St. Joseph's, went to St. Mary's High School. He played in the football team at St. Mary's. Earned his letter there. Then, when I went to service, he was. I was 19 when I went into service, I guess. Of course, he wasn't old enough yet. But by the time I'd gone into service and served overseas, we came back. then he had gone to the Cerrito because the war was still on, and he was drafted into the Army, and he served his basic training at Fort Ord. And in fact, when I came back from overseas, I took Uncle Fernie and two of his friends, Sam West and Kenny Tavalero, back to the railroad station in San Francisco. And they were in the infantry, and all three of them were shipped out over to Okinawa. Well, Uncle Fernie was wounded by a sniper, and Sam West was hit in the arm, and Kenny Tavalero was killed. Uncle Fernie never did really regain the use of that leg. It did a lot of nerve damage, and he limped when he got tired. The leg wasn't useless, but it limited him. And he came back, and under the GI Bill of Rights, he decided he would go to college, and he went to Armstrong College in Berkeley and got his degree in accounting. In fact, I still got an old report card in there, and he got pretty good grades. Then after he got out of college, he went to work for National Lead up in Selby as an accountant, that's where he worked. He was a little older because he was in the Army so long, because he was in the hospital over at Letterman for a long time doing all kinds of surgery. Then he was sent up to a place in Auburn, which was a convalescent hospital called DeWitt Hospital for the Army. He spent a lot of time up there, so he spent more time in the hospital than any other place in the Army. So he was a little older when he got out. And then he was working the Selby, I guess, when he was killed. But he always loved his nephews and everything, and he would come out every Friday night, and we'd have a couple of little tiddlies, and Reed would cook him a nice meal, and he'd buy you kids candy or bring you a bunch of junk. And he loved his sports. In those days, the World Series was only the daytime, so he'd plan his vacation for World Series time so he could watch the games. And he would have loved it if he had lived long enough to see you kids get involved, or even my grandkids now getting involved with all the sports that they're in. He would just have loved that. And I guess that's most of what Fernie was all about, I guess. And one time we went to a vacation up in Pinecrest. We told him if he wanted to come up on the weekend to see us, fine. Well, about 10 o'clock.